I'm Andrew Halford, and I'm the Executive Director at Heartland Cares here in Paducah. We're starting this new series of programs once a month to talk about Heartland Cares and the services that we offer in Paducah. We're probably the best kept secret in the city of Paducah, primarily because of the stigma associated with HIV, which is our specialty at Heartland Cares. Heartland Cares grew out of an interest in the 90s, a concern in the 90s about health care for HIV. And it grew out of citizen, family, community awareness. And the very first grant that we applied for is called a HOPWA grant, which stands for Housing Opportunities for People with AIDS. And that was in 1997, and by 1998, we at Heartland Cares had become a full-service clinic offering medical services, medical case management, and also housing services. So housing became a really very integral part of what we do. HIV affects all ages, all genders, all races, all socioeconomic status. It has no face. In fact, one of the best brochures that I've ever seen is a brochure that says HIV has no face. I mean, you're not going to know anybody who has this disease just by looking at them. Literally, when I say no age, it has no age. Young, middle-aged, senior citizens. One of the concerns I think now for us is that with the treatments that are available, many people aren't concerned about the death sentence that HIV had in the very early days. But Heartland Cares grew out of that concern. Grew out of the concern from family and also clients about their health care. We in Paducah serve over 400 clients. We serve 20 counties in southern Illinois and 27 counties in western Kentucky, and we're averaging now about 50 new cases every year. So we're not necessarily seeing a decrease in HIV. We are obviously seeing better care with the available medications that we have. We work probably with the best infectious disease doctors in our region, or I would say, and when I say region, I mean the Southeast. They're very dedicated to what they do. We have a staff of 17, obviously including 2 infectious disease doctors, as well as a nurse practitioner. We have 2 RNs on staff. We have 2 CNAs, certified nurse assistants. We have a mental health, licensed mental health specialist, and a licensed dietitian. So we consider ourselves to be a one-stop shop. We consider ourselves to be a full-service clinic offering all of this array of services that anybody might need. Since 2012, we've also been served by a fully staffed pharmacy, Nashville Pharmacy Services out of Nashville, Tennessee. This connection is really very important to us because it allows for greater adherence with our clients, as well as with the doctors and the medical case managers, because the adherence is important in any kind of disease that a person might have, but particularly in the regimen associated with HIV. Because housing was that very early emphasis in Paducah, it's important to understand that housing is one of those key foundations to health and to the care of an individual. And you know, that might seem strange that this particular disease has this component to it where maybe other diseases don't. But it's really important to understand the stigma that's still associated and the need for these additional services that we have. So this afternoon, I've invited Steve Clark, who is our housing case manager. Steve's been with Heartland Cares for over 9 years. I was giving him an extra year of service by saying that he'd been here with us for 10 years. But Steve has a really great background in care and in the housing care for our clients. So I want to have a conversation with Steve this afternoon about the housing component, its importance as a foundation for care. So Steve, welcome to this first.
Thank you.
Heartland Cares. Love our set here. Thanks to Joey for doing that. What is the real importance of housing as part of the foundation for the kind of care that we deliver at Heartland Cares?
Well, I think when the housing department was first discussed, or when a group of people first started talking about housing, it was discovered that a lot of people who had become HIV positive were losing their housing, maybe because the family just didn't understand. Many of them were afraid of it, and many simply said, "You can't live with us any longer." So it became evident that some people with HIV were going to need to seek other housing arrangements. And they heard about the HOPWA grant that was a national grant, a federal grant, and they began to question about it and applied for it and received it. And it was a smaller amount of money to begin with, but it helped some people with just such emergencies as utilities, electric, gas, water. Sometimes they were able to pay those regularly, but every now and then would run into a snag and just needed a little bit of help. And so it could help with that. Some needed ongoing assistance with their rent every month, and it was based on their income, sort of like Section 8 or public housing, where the tenant would pay 30% of their income and the agency or the grant would pick up the rest of that.
So back to what I said in the opening about the stigma associated with HIV. This was a very important thing because people didn't understand the disease. They didn't understand how that you contracted HIV. And you know, knowing some very early people who died from this disease, it was really very devastating.
Yes.
So HOPWA coming in 1997, then we have built on that particular program with other housing programs. Talk about what other housing programs that we now have at Heartland Cares.
Okay. Well, the HOPWA grant started as basically a short-term emergency grant. And as years went by, a couple of years, we saw that it needed ongoing. Some people needed every month assistance, so we were able to divide that grant and create a portion of it that was earmarked for just ongoing every month assistance. And it was sort of limited to say that you can receive this assistance up to 2 years. Within a year or so after that, we were given an opportunity to apply for a supportive housing grant. And the first supportive housing grant that we got was called a transitional housing grant, which the qualification for that, the eligibility, was that they had to be homeless. They had to come to us homeless, and they, because it was written for Heartland Cares, which was dealing with HIV, we stipulated in the grant that they also had to be HIV positive. So the only criteria was you had to be homeless, according to HUD's definition of homelessness, and you had to be HIV positive. You didn't have to have an income, but you could have an income, just not able to have the resources to gain your own housing.
You've said the income part, I think, a couple of times. We don't fully fund any rental assistance, do we?
We don't own any of our own buildings, or we're not tied to or affiliated with any apartment complex. The way the program works, typically the instructions or the client's part of the task is to locate suitable housing for themselves. And then we have to inspect it. If it passes just a basic habitability inspection, then we can subsidize that unit.
Okay. Does the client have to pay any portion of the rent in order to qualify for assistance through our housing grants?
The grant stipulates that the tenant should pay 30% of their income toward
Okay.
rent and utilities.
Okay.
We have many
Rent
clients.
and utilities, not just the rent.
Right.
Okay.
We call it the gross rent. We add the rent plus the utilities. That equals the gross rent.
Okay.
So they should pay 30% of their income toward that gross rent.
Toward that.
Yes.
And that's all based on the fair market value?
We have, HUD puts out a report called the fair market rent. And so for every county, that county is assigned, or a calculation is done to give that county a fair market rent. And unfortunately, those fair market rents are very, very conservative. Currently, the McCracken County fair market rent is $483. And that fair market rent includes the rent plus the utilities.
Okay.
So let's think about it. It's really difficult to find a place to rent in McCracken County, Paducah, for $483 that includes your utilities.
Okay. Okay.
That's for a single individual.
Okay, so if my rent doesn't include utilities, then that has to be added on top, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So maybe your rent would be $350, and then we would have $133 to work with
Okay.
for utilities.
Okay. Okay.
And that's very conservative.
Okay, and when we're talking about multiple counties that we serve in Kentucky, you've just said one thing that's really very important, and that is that each of those counties would have a different schedule of fair market rental prices, right?
That's right.
Okay, and you know, one of the things, I was reading a blog this morning at work, and it's talking about the southern region, and that the southern region of the United States is seeing an increase, not a decrease, in HIV infections. And one of the reasons is that we live in a rural, I know this is hard for people in Paducah to understand, but we are classified as a rural population when it comes to assistance. So that's also important to understand, is that you and the other member of your team, you have to travel throughout this entire western Kentucky area as you go to inspect these places and as you work with different landlords. Okay, so we've mentioned HOPWA, we've mentioned the transition. What other? We have home.
We have a grant that's called the Home Grant.
Right.
Just all capital letters, HOME.
Okay.
That grant.
And it doesn't stand for anything other than home, right?
Right.
Okay, good.
No. And that grant provides leasing dollars,
Okay.
only leasing dollars, to also pay the same type subsidy. Works the same way. Tenant pays 30% of their income toward their rent and or utilities, and the agency picks up the balance. And it's all based on the fair market rent rate set by HUD.
Okay. Out of the 400 plus clients that we serve, how many of those receive assistance through housing?
Okay. Probably, I know on an ongoing basis, we probably serve about 50 clients a month that are on continual subsidy. But those who receive short-term emergency, those who just request information periodically or seeking help locating a unit, we probably serve about 150, 175 in a year's time.
Okay, okay. Now, one of the things that really impresses me about what you and your teammate do is that you do a lot of counseling with clients, because you are not only interested in providing them with immediate, temporary, in some instances fairly long-term assistance, but you're also interested in getting them into more permanent housing.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that and that process.
A lot of times when people come to us, their whole situation is just unstable. And you know, we want to try to help them understand how to maintain a better stability and how to be able to pay their bills on time. If they don't have a job, we encourage them to get the training to get a job or to go out and begin looking for a job. If they're actually disabled and they feel they're disabled and their doctors can substantiate that, then we encourage them to work on getting their disability. and we've had some success at that. A lot of people have come to us with zero income, and we are able to work with them to at least get their disability started. Some get a part-time job, some work on into full-time. But the purpose of our program is to help them to have stable housing in the long run. All of our programs, too, are just temporary transitional programs. It's not permanent housing. And we require that everybody apply for Section 8 public housing because we want them to have the opportunity to have a more permanent housing. We talk a lot about budget. Sometimes we talk about housekeeping, about nutrition, about cooking, keeping house, just some very basic things that sometimes we just overlook. But these people need a little bit of coaching and guidance in that area.
Okay, and I think the coaching, the mentoring that all of our staff would do is really
Right.
very important to the stabilization of the clients with whom we work. But you've used that word, and I think that's really key, and you and I talked about that this week, about providing this foundation through housing. I mean, when we think about a house, in fact, I drove past a house just this week there is no foundation to it, and I'm thinking, geez, I don't know that I'd want to live there. How do you get underneath there and work? I mean, you're going to have to dig under you're going to have to dig in the dirt under this house. There's no foundation. So I think that's really key in the philosophy of housing assistance, is that you're providing this foundation. And you mentioned that at the very beginning about the stigma associated and that family members and friends didn't understand this. What's the importance behind this philosophy in housing of the foundation?
Of course, when someone comes to us, comes to the clinic who's HIV positive, they're given a lot of information, one of which is health care and taking care of yourself. But if these clients at the same time don't have appropriate housing, then they're not going to focus very well on taking care of themselves. So one of the first things we want to make sure is that they have adequate housing. And if they have a roof over their head, a safe place to stay at night, then they can begin to focus on the treatment procedures, the correct medications, taking the medication as scheduled, focus on getting a job, getting more income, other things in life that are important to us. But housing seems to come first. If they don't have that, it's hard to move on to anything else.
Okay, and we have success in dealing with our clients through this by providing them with this foundation, right?
We do. We have a lot of success.
Okay. Now you also mentioned something about homeless. Do we have a large homeless HIV population in Paducah?
And that's an interesting question because being a rural area in western Kentucky, a lot of people will not allow someone else to be homeless on the street. They'll take them in for a night or two. They'll say, well, you can sleep on my couch. Well, according to HUD's definition, sleeping on someone's couch is not homeless, and that would not qualify them for the grant. They actually have to be in a shelter or in a motel paid for by a third party. They have to be in a place that's listed or considered a place not habitable, not meant for human habitation.
Okay.
So you don't find many homeless people in western Kentucky because the general public around here just wants to make sure that somebody has a place to lay their head at night.
Okay.
They won't let them sleep out on a park bench or under a bridge.
Okay. Do we give assistance, short-term assistance, like with motels or anything through housing?
We are not able to do that. Several years ago, one of our grants did allow emergency housing to put someone in a motel. But over the years, a few nights in a motel stay equaled a whole month's rent in an apartment.
Exactly.
And so it was eating up our funding. And we were basically instructed from Kentucky Housing Corporation to discontinue that service.
Okay. Do we have adequate resources when it comes to affordable housing for our clients in this area?
It's very scarce. We have created some relationships with area landlords so that we may know a few places to direct people to. But with the demand for housing being higher than the supply, we run into a lot of times where the landlords have raised the rents higher than what our programs will be able to subsidize.
Well, yeah, okay.
So it's a difficult task. Many times our clients find it's very hard to locate a unit that fits all the guidelines and fits the price that HUD allows us to use.
Okay. You know, you've mentioned something that I think is really important for us, and that is the lists that all of our staff have to have in order to give assistance to our clients. I mean, we've got to, you're talking about a list of landlords, a list of possible places that people can live. We're talking about doctors. We're talking about pharmacies. We're talking about utilities. We're talking about all types of services, food banks. So you have to be a lister of places, right?
Yes.
Okay, because
And those lists change.
they do.
You know,
they're
some of those
always in a state of
places-
flux.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. How would you gauge our success in delivering housing services to our clients? Are we successful?
I think we're very successful. Recently, we've had a few change in some of the grants, but for the most part, if someone comes to us with a housing need, we work with that individual until that need is met. And even if we're not able to meet that need, we try to refer that client to someone else or to a resource where they can get that need met.
Okay. So are we in need of additional folks within our community to step forward and to work with us to become part of that list for affordable places for our clients to live?
We certainly are.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
okay. And so they just have to contact you, Steve Clark, right?
That would work.
That would work. That would work. Can I come in and out of the housing program?
Yes. It depends on what you're needing, you know. A tenant, a client can come in for a short time when they're needing just emergency assistance. And then they may be able to handle things on their own for a year or two. And then they hit a snag, maybe they got sick and lost a little bit of work, and so they need our help again. Sometimes we help with things like utility bills because that person had a significant car expense. Maybe they had a medical expense they had to pay for. But unusual expenses in the home that cause you to run short on being able to pay your basics, such as your rent and utility, we can help with your rents and utilities because of that other expense.
Okay, and that's the part of the emergency assistance
Yes.
that we offer. And again, we're offering that so that they can defray, they can use some of that money that we help them defray to pay for medicines, other health care needs,
Exactly.
Transportation. Does housing help with transportation at all?
No. We don't have any grants that are funded to specifically help with transportation. We can help with transportation maybe to get to an appointment to us or to a medical appointment. But as far as general funding to help you with your monthly transportation costs, no.
Okay. Now, you also said something that I think people need to understand, and that is that we're not the ones always going out and looking for the affordable housing. That you said that a client who's interested also has to do some of that research.
That's right.
But they would come to you for assistance from your list, from your multiple listing. Let's call ourselves a multiple listing agency. They could come to you and find out where some of those places are.
They can, and that list changes constantly. And sometimes I refer people to just contact the Section 8 office and ask for their rental list.
Okay.
The Section 8 office gets a list of landlords who have been approved for Section 8, and they may be landlords that have an availability.
Okay, okay, okay. Do we find that we're still having this problem with the stigma with landlords not wanting to rent not wanting to work with us?
We do, And this day and age, you know, some of us think that everybody knows about HIV now and how it's caused and how you contract it, and there's not any danger of, you know, getting it by shaking hands with someone or just being in the same room or, you know. But there are a lot of people who verbally say, I understand, yet when you get down to the nitty-gritty and you're talking with them, I have had landlords point blank ask me, you're not from that HIV place, are you? The person you're wanting to send to us as a tenant is not one of your HIV clients, is it? And that's really unfortunate, you know. So I usually take that opportunity to just educate that person a little bit about, you know, what do you know about HIV? Do you know how it's spread? What do you understand about HIV?
And I think that's the other interesting thing about this blog that I mentioned earlier, and that is that in the South there is still this stigma, this discrimination against people who have HIV. So again, if any landlord out there is interested in working with us, we have a lot of volunteers who come to us and offer their assistance. If there is a landlord out there, all they need to do is contact Steve Clark, and Steve Clark would be willing to come out and do an assessment. Thank you very much, Steve, for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate your service, and we'll continue to do the good work. And thank you for watching. I'm Andrew Halford, Executive Director at Heartland Cares.